Is this sound long or short? Who said short? Is it long or short? Why is it long? Because it can occur in an open syllable. Those of you who still think this is short, you need to correct that in your mind, because in some of your notes, in the notes of some of you, it shows that some of you still think this is a short vowel. It is a long vowel. Everybody clear on that now? Is this long or short? It's long. Once more, is this long or short? Okay, don't forget. And the reason it came up is because Mindy noted that in the notes of one of you, you said that ah is an example of, okay, and I think I said it that way myself, that ah is an example of schwa following a short vowel. I think I did mention that myself that day, so I think that I better correct it. Ah is a diphthong in American English. The sound after it is like ah almost, ah, ah. It's not because it's short, it's because it's the way it is, ah, ah. It is a pure vowel in British English. It's not short, but it has a diphthongal quality in American English. Okay, that's to clear up that. I think that's partly my fault, so I hope that's now clear. Basically, what we're going to do today is we are going to try to make headway in Chapter 2. So let's go to page 37 and start. Everybody have your book open to page 37? Let's go. And I may ask you to stop in the middle of a paragraph. I do it anyway to explain. But I may ask you to do it, and then I will continue summarizing in order to save time. Sometimes I'm no faster than having a student read. But I would like to get through the chapter as quickly as possible. So maybe I will have you read only part of the paragraph. I'll say thank you, and then I will summarize. Let's go on. Let's start, actually.
It is unfortunate that...
All right, third word. How do we say that? What kind of ending does it have? A-T-E. Everybody put this in your notes. If a word ends in A-T-E, what do you need to determine first? If it is a noun or an adjective as opposed to a verb. Everybody put this in your notes. It sounds like you're not really familiar with the rule. I know I've mentioned it before. If a word ends with A-T-E, first determine, is it a verb or is it a noun or adjective? Nouns and adjectives behave in the same way, so put those in the same category. So if it is a verb, we pronounce A-T-E, an A-T-E suffix as ate. For example, graduate. I know I've mentioned it because I've just reviewed the DVD where I said this in class. Now, I can't expect you to remember every single thing I say, but that shows why it's so important. Number one, to take notes. Number one, to pay attention. Number two, don't let your mind wander. That's hard, I know. I have that problem myself. Number two, to take good notes. And number three, to go over your notes carefully. That's why we have you organize and hand in your notes every week, because otherwise you might write something down, it sits in your notes. Usually we don't remember something like this the first 2 times it's mentioned. The third time, maybe you start remembering. That's the way it is with new vocabulary words as well. The first 2 times it doesn't sink in. Maybe the third time you remember it. A word that ends with A-T-E, what do you need to determine? Whether it is a verb or a noun or adjective. And what is this? It's an adjective. So if it is a verb, if the word ending in ATE is a verb, we pronounce the ending as ate, as in graduate. If it is a noun or adjective, we pronounce it with a schwa, ut. Everybody, please remember this well, because this is a very simple rule. It's almost always right, not 100%, but almost always right. If we make mistakes or if we are irregular, it's usually in the direction of nouns pronounced as ATE, like candidate. I consider more standard. We can also say candidate. A lot of people do say candidate. I would prefer candidate. It follows the rule. Okay? Continue. Start over, actually.
It is unfortunate that different books on phonetics use different forms of phonetic transcription.
All right, I'm going to stop you right here because this paragraph is quite long and sort of wordy, and I've already told you the content. Is that right? You will find different transcription systems. We're sticking with standard, worldwide agreed upon IPA. There are other systems that are used for TESOL books and in phonology and in other places that, for example, like to use a single letter for ch. And I said this in a previous class. It's a C, the letter C with a hot check on it, and you can see it in the text. They give you examples of S with a hot check is pronounced what? Go to the middle of the paragraph. Sh, right. And Z with a hot check is pronounced Z. C with a hot check is pronounced ch. And we've got one more. J with a hot check is pronounced j. So that's about all you need to know from this paragraph. I've already told you in a previous class that we use T and esh for ch. The reason is because they are phonetically two separate sounds. Phonologically, how many phonemes? How many inwei are T and esh? I'll put it on the board so we're sure that we're talking about the same thing. T and sh. That's how many phonetic sounds? It's two, and it's an affricate, which is a se ca yin. It's a se yin plus a ca yin, so it's two sounds phonetically. But phonemically, how many sounds is it? How many phonemes is it? That means, can we separate these two sounds in a word like church? Like t, sh, t, ch. We can't do that because ch is one single inseparable phoneme. It's two sounds phonetically, but it's only one phoneme. We can't separate it and still make sense. We can go ch, ch, but we can't go t, sh. We just can't do that because it's an inseparable phoneme. So in phonetics, we like to use the double symbols. It reminds you that those really are two different sounds produced in two different ways. But when we're talking about phonology, it makes good sense to use a single symbol because we can't really separate it in speech. Everybody clear on that? And so his point here is saying that different books will use different systems. A lot of books don't use IPA. They will use, for example, Y for the Y sound. What symbol do we use for the Y sound in IPA? J. Why do we not like somebody using Y for the J sound? Because we need the Y symbol for the U sound. And we don't need U for English. And that's why phonologists and TESOL books can use it. But here we are in Taiwan. Do we need that Y for our purposes? We need it for Mandarin, right? We need it for Mandarin. We don't need it for Minanyu. Minanyu has no U. Mandarin does. So we need to keep our symbols unambiguous and consistent. Other books can do it if they're only talking about English and they've got other purposes in mind, like phonology or TESOL. Okay? So that's all this paragraph is saying. He's saying that there is an example which will show that T-esh is really two sounds. This is towards the bottom of the paragraph. If you say why choose, what's the beginning of choose? Ch, right. But we could also divide it up across words. We can't divide it up in the same word, but across words we can. We can say white shoes. If I put a big pause there, you won't get the point. But if I say it fast, white shoes, white shoes. Did you hear a ch in there? White shoes, white shoes, white shoes. The T and the esh will go together quickly, and then we will hear the ch. So he's using that as an illustration or as a way of showing you that ch is really two sounds, white shoes, white shoes, white shoes. Everybody got it? Got the point? If you don't, please raise your hand and we'll go over it again. Okay, but what is the difference between white shoes and white shoes? White shoes, they both have a ch sound in them. They have the same symbols and the same sequence. What's the difference? One simple word. Ruby? We stopped at the stop. We also stop at the stop in ch, but it's very, very short. So the one word I'm after is timing. The timing is different. We have a longer pause after the T in white than we do after the T in choose. There's still a T there and we still stop, but we stop a very, very short time. So white shoes, a longer stop. White choose, 特后面有个 stop, but it's so fast, we can barely catch it. Annie, is it okay? Yeah. So that's the point of this paragraph. You are responsible for reading this on your own. We're going to the next page. Some other books on phonetics transcribe ch and j, as in church, and judge with single symbols. We've already talked about that. We'll see that some linguistic segments have two phonetic elements, for example, vowel diphthongs. Linguistic segments, that's what we can call a diphthong. Somebody asked me, is a diphthong one sound or two? Well, it depends on how you define it. It's two vowels put together in the same syllable. But we can call that a segment. We can call that a segment. They have two elements. 它是用这两个词来解决这个问题。Element 来代表个别的母音 R 跟 E, and then segment 来称呼就是 I 整个 diphthong. And so for a diphthong, it's good to use two symbols. He's already explained why he likes to use t and esh for the ch sound. Phonetically, they're two sounds. And also for diphthongs, it's good to use two symbols. In English spelling, we usually have, for many diphthongs, we have two symbols, but they are not continuous. For example, here, this A stands for the A sound, which we write like this. But it's not just the A that tells us that. In spelling and phonics, it's the silent E at the end. Without that, let's use a better example. Let's use rat, because this forms a word, and rate. In both cases, this A, in each case, the A stands for a different thing. But in this case, we know that it's A because of the E at the end. So this is A, and this one is A. Is that right? Okay. So that's just talking about spelling. In spelling, we often, in fact, do use two letters to represent a diphthong. Or, for example, pale. Here we're using AI. In spelling, we actually do usually use two symbols. In some phonetic symbol systems, they don't. For example, a very famous one in Taiwan, they only use one symbol for the A sound. Which system is that? KK, right. We've already covered this. They use this for A, they use this for O, and I've told you we're changing to this and this for O. So Latifoget is just going over the reasons why it's good to use two symbols for affricates and why it's good to use two symbols for diphthongs. In Taiwan, it's especially important, as I've mentioned earlier. It's because the second element of the diphthong in Taiwan is often dropped. You monophthongize diphthongs. 台湾经常把双母音把它单元音化。也就是后面的那个子音那个母音没有念。So instead of saying take, in Taiwan you often hear tack. Yeah. For example, tack that pen, tack. We often hear tech or tack for take. I think it's partly because in KK you use only one symbol. We said this in a previous class. So Peter Latifoget is now, and also Professor Johnson, they're just going over these points. It's better to use the phonetic way of writing it for our purposes in this class. Okay? So both for affricates and for what? Diphthongs. Diphthongs. Not diphthongs, everyone. Diphthongs. All right. The glottal stop. He's talking about glottal stop that begins words that are spelled with an initial vowel. We've talked a bit about glottal stops. We're in the middle of the second paragraph on page 38. Hosayin is usually the first sound we hear of a word that starts with a vowel, especially when it's the first word in an utterance. So, for example, is he coming? The first sound is not, it's not a vowel, it is a glottal stop. Is he coming? Is he coming? And he mentions this in the middle of the second paragraph. Is written phonetically with, we already know this. We don't use the slashes. We're going to use this because it's not a phoneme. It's not an independent phoneme. It's a phonetic realization. 它是属于 allophone. 它是同位音. Okay, it's or a phone. It's a phonetic realization of a pronunciation. Okay, so we can use this symbol at the beginning of words that start with vowels. We usually don't put it in because it's understood, because it's a rule. Almost every word that starts with a vowel, especially if it's the first word in an utterance, the first sound is actually a glottal stop. Because it's a rule, we don't have to keep marking it because it's redundant. 大家都知道，我们就懒得写。If we are being careful and we're trying to produce a more narrow transcription, we may put that in. So in the middle of the paragraph, it says that the word flee east, 往东逃走. It's pronounced flee east, flee east. First of all, it's how many syllables? 2 syllables. And second, it's got that glottal stop in between. We don't usually say flee east. We can say flee east. We can say flee east. I'm trying to take out the glide. Or usually we will put in a glottal stop. Flee east. Everyone, flee east. Flee east. Let's try to do it without the glottal stop, but still with 2 syllables. Flee east. Flee east. We can do that, and we do it often. But usually we'll put a glottal stop in there to separate the 2 syllables, the 2 words. Flee east. Flee east. All right. How is that different from fleeced? Fleeced means 把它身上的毛去掉. Fleeced 还有一个俚语的意思. It means 骗走人家的钱财. He fleeced him. He fleeced him. 他就骗走他所有的钱财. To fleece somebody. 这是俚语. So, flee east is one pronunciation. And if it's fleeced, it's fleeced. Fleeced. Everyone, fleeced. Fleeced. So, then he says the status of a glottal stop the glottal stop as a consonant phoneme in English is questionable because its distribution is limited. We often look for, well, when we are talking about phonemes, we are doing phonology. 我们要看一个音的分配. And if it sometimes turns up, but not very often, 它就是很少出现，而且好像是很特别的情况之下才会出现，我们就很怀疑这是不是真正的一个 phoneme， 是不是真正的一个音位？它可能只是一个表面的一个 phonetic 的一个呈现，它可能只是因为某一些情况会产生一个音。I'll give you an example where that's also an issue. Like in the word, and this is a famous one. How do you say this? Tense. And in theory, we would transcribe it like this. Is that right? But listen to how I say it and see if you can hear another sound in there that we didn't transcribe. I'm very tense. I'm really tense. Do you hear another sound in there besides the ones up there? I'm very tense. We already have the s, so take the s out. We have to isolate it. T, there you go. Do you hear a t in there? Tense. I'm very tense. How about 跳舞? Dance. You can be careful and say dance, but usually that T is in there. So tense actually sounds like this. It sounds the same as 很多帐篷. And dance, in theory, is this, but in practice, sounds usually like this, dance. For this one, there's a joke. It's a really famous phonetics joke, and you should know about it, and you can try it on your friends. But you have to know 2 vocabulary words first. First, in Native American culture, 那个三角形的那种住屋是一个帐篷的那种住屋， 那个叫 tipi， 它拼法很多种，也有 tipi，tipi， 这是那个原住民的一种帐篷作为住屋。There's another kind， 它是用树皮做的，然后它的形状像蒙古包那样子。That's called a wigwam. Now this sounds like really 题外话, but you need to know these two words to understand the joke. There's a guy who's having terrible problems sleeping well. He just can't sleep well. So he goes to a doctor and he says, Doctor, you know, I'm having so much trouble sleeping because one night I dream I'm a teepee. Do you understand? 我做梦见我是那个原住民的那种帐篷。And then he says, and then the next night I dream I'm a wigwam. I keep dreaming that I'm a teepee and I'm a wigwam. And the doctor says, well, you know what your problem is? You're too tense. You laughed. You got it. Isn't that good? And that joke is based on this phenomenon that tense actually sounds like tense, right? So there's maybe your first phonetics joke. This is a really famous one, and it's a good one that illustrates it. The reason we have that T sound, we will run into it later in the text. This is called an epenthetic consonant. Epenthetic. And I think I've mentioned it before. 它就是某一些语境里面额外会冒出来的一个音，会冒出来的一个额外的音，也可以这么说。And it's because if we have a nasal and then a voiceless fricative after it, 它就会产生一个跟 n 同位的一个色音。So n 是 nasal， 后面 s 是一个无声的一个擦音。然后呢，它就会冒出一个跟 n 同位、同一个发音那个位置的，也是同样是 alveolar 的一个色音，一个无声色音。这是一个规则。This happens. Another place that happens that will help you with your pronunciation, and that is with the word strength. Strength. Now, a lot of Taiwanese say strength. And in fact, a lot of native speakers do too. I've been paying attention for years. A lot of native speakers pronounce this strength. But I don't, because that's an NG. As far as I'm concerned, it really should be velar. So strength to me sounds weird, but I hear it. For me, the standard way is string, 对不对？ ing. 然后再加一个 th. 那是不是一个 nasal 加上一个 voiceless fricative? 是不是? So what kind of a stop are we going to get in this word? What kind of an epenthetic stop are we going to get? There we go, you got it. K, right? So listen to the way I say this normally, and I'm not doing this on purpose. It's just the way I say it. Strength. Can you all hear the K? Yeah, strength. Strength. Once more, everybody, strength. Very good. Now, in this case, we have a T. In this case, we have a K. Are those phonemes? 我们要去把它当做一个独立的一个音位吗 ？No， 那是因为刚好有这个规则，一个鼻音碰到一个无声的擦音，它就是无中生有，会冒出一个无声的一个同一个发音位置的一个色音。那不是一个 phoneme， 那只是一个表面的一个 phonetic 的一个现象。And that's what he's saying here is probably the case with glottal stops. 那只是表面，那是根据语境会出现的一个额外的音，而不是一个独立的，不是属于我们的语音系统。然后没有最小对比的例子。For example, is and is. Those are not two different words. Just two ways of saying the same thing. Strength and strength. 没有 K. 甚至 strength. 这三个都一样。Okay, so we're talking here about phonemes. We want to figure out what the phonemes of English are. And he's saying that we've got a glottal stop that we use a lot in English. The two main purposes are 母音开头的字第一个音是 glottal stop, usually, at the beginning of an utterance, especially. And it often replaces a T in what situation? I said in another class. If it's the last sound of a syllable and the next syllable starts with a 这个音节最后一个音是 t， 下一个音节第一个音是个子音，那个 t 要怎么念？ I just went over the DVD. We spent a lot of time on it in class, so it's in your notes, I'm sure. It's a glottal stop. Thank you. Very good. Maybe you're just being shy, quiet. So remember our example was hit me. Hit me. We can say it with a T, but we often say hit me. Hit. 后面那个 T 会变色彩，也不能变成一个喉塞音。So those are two common purposes for the glottal stop in English. Neither of them is phonemic. 这两个都不是 phoneme, 都是 allophone, 都是一个表面现象，就是某一个语境，它有某一个变化，有某一个音会出现，它不是一个属于我们的基本的那个 set of phonemes. Everybody's got that? The set of phonemes are the set of symbols that will make a difference if we insert them into a word, like pat, bat, P and B, 绝对是不同的 phoneme. But eat and eat, those are not different phonemes. 所以 glottal stop 不是一个 phoneme, 应该不是一个 phoneme. All clear? 这里就是讲 glottal stop 的那 phonemic status, 它不是一个 phoneme, 而且为什么? So we say flee east to make it clearer. We separate the words. It's got two syllables. We put that glottal stop in there to keep them separate. If we took the glottal stop out, it would be flee east. It'd still have the same meaning. Fleeced is only one syllable, and that's entirely different. Where other consonants may appear in a variety of positions in words, for example, note the K in cat, scab, back, active, across. Glottal stop only occurs word initially before vowels in American English. 所以只有那个第一个音是母音的时候啊，那才会有 glottal stop. So across 这样子。In Cockney, Cockney is worker class speech of the East End of London. It also appears between vowels in words like butter and button. So butter, I have what in my kind of English? I have a tap, butter, butter. For button, I don't have a tap. What do I have? I have a glottal stop, but usually it's an unreleased T plus a glottal stop. Button. 没有 T 也可以. Let's talk about butter because that's different from the way I do it. In Cockney, it would be butter. Butter. Everybody try butter. All right, 瓶子, I use a tap. I say bottle. But how would a Cockney speaker say bottle? Bottle. Bottle. 对，这是 Cockney 的一个特色. This is important to know. Cockney, in fact, is becoming an endangered speech variety. 现在真的讲 Cockney 的人，真正的 Cockney 越来越少. I have put an example of it on the web page, on one of the web pages. Maybe I'll dig it out during break. He is an author. 他是个作家. He's a genuine native speaker of Cockney, and you'll hear it spoken very naturally. Usually when you hear Cockney spoken now, it's a parody of Cockney. 他是在模仿，在讽刺，在搞笑，然后不到底. So a lot of people don't really speak it natively anymore. However, the glottal stop is used a lot in many dialects, especially in British English. Because it is associated with Cockney, do you think that Cockney is admired as a prestige variety of British English? No, it is not. It's a less prestigious kind of variety. And so, for that reason, Brits are very sensitive to glottal stops. Glottal stops are kind of looked down on. Even though Brits use glottal stops a lot in certain places, they don't notice those. But they will notice it if you say butter instead of butter. And they will immediately have a prejudice against you. They will judge you. And I'm sorry, you can't help it. I had this discussion with my British friend just not long ago. And I was talking about, remember I told you to avoid saying X, right? Ask me a question. 讲过吧? What's the reason? Well, first of all, it's not standard. That's the simplest reason. But also, what do we associate it with? Southern and Black English. And they're not prestige varieties of English, and they will distract your listener. And I was talking with my friend about, we can't help it. We have got this race thing. It still has not been solved. When we see somebody, we can't forget their color immediately. It's just the way it is. I think Chinese are the same. And then he says, well, that depends on the individual. I said, no, I think it's everybody. I said, okay, well, how about you? If you meet somebody who talks like, says ba'a, and then he is very working class, not sophisticated, he said, oh, yes, well, that's our problem, we Brits. 一讲到 working class, 他的反应差不多，所以他们 race 还不如 work， 就是那个社会阶级很重。Even now in Britain, it's the same as race in America. Race is an issue there too, but what social class you belong to is really, really a big thing in Britain. And then you will hear a story, I think it's by George Bernard Shaw. He says that all you have to do, oh yeah, it's from 窈窕淑女. It's from Pygmalion, his original. He says all a British person has to do is open his mouth to make another British person hate him. It's 很严重, I'm not kidding you. As soon as they hear that ba'a, you don't count, they're not going to be friends with you probably because they're not good enough for you. Now, I'm saying it really extreme. Things are changing now because glottal stops are becoming more and more common in varieties of British English. But I'm just telling you that these are social linguistic phenomena, and they are gut reactions. We can't help it. We can't help it. You can use your conscious brain to say, I'm going to overcome that prejudice and forget about it or try to ignore it. You can do that, but it's still there. And for Brits, this thing is a big thing. So that's why glottal stop is an issue. Not such an issue in American, although it is a small one, because if I heard people say airplane or the other, 甚至 the other, 我都有感觉到. And to me, it sounded uneducated. I said in a previous class. We should say, at least in my opinion, not the other, but the other, the other. That to me is more standard and it's more prestigious. The other, it was already common when I was a kid, and I kind of was a bit judgmental about it. So, but 是非常严重的. All right, but keep in mind. And then he's got other examples here. He says that the glottal stop also is used with the final T in words like cat and bat. They can be glottalized, replaced by the glottal stop, or the glottal stop comes before it or after it at the same time. It can be in any of those places. So if your voice goes down to a creak, remember we talked about a creak being as low as you can go, you can count the pulses. Remember the creaky voice that we used to find what? Which formant? First formant, that's right. So if we go way down to the creak, then we're getting, when we stop to just one creak, that's a glottal stop. And when we have a final stop in words, so here it gives you examples like cat and bat, we often have a glottal stop there because we're going down to a creak. So bat, bat, 后面 creaky. And when I stop at the creak, it becomes a glottal stop. So bat, I still have a T, but I may have a glottal stop together with the T. That's what they're talking about here. So look at the end of paragraph 2, page 38. You need to mark that. That will be in a test. Okay? So this is a glottalized final stop in a syllable. So cat, cat, I've already gone down to the creak, so there's a glottal stop. Cat, cat. I still have a T. I would not drop that T. But it may be glottalized. So pronounced with simultaneous. 通常是同时. It can be a little earlier, a little later, at the same time. Let's just say it's most often simultaneous. 同时是比较多. Cat. Glottal stop 加上 final stop. Okay? 可以吗? So these are different functions of the glottal stop. Is any of them phonemic? Is there any difference between, listen carefully, is there any difference between cat and cat? Cat, cat. Is there any difference? No. The second one, I got creaky and had a glottal stop. The first one, I did not. So is the glottal stop a phoneme? If it doesn't make a difference in meaning, it's not a phoneme. That's your test. If it makes a difference in meaning, if it becomes a new word with a different meaning, then it's a different phoneme. But if it's just a variation of the same word, it is not a phoneme. 清楚吗? We need to know this in order to judge whether a sound is a phoneme or not. And that is relevant in the analysis of just about any languages, because I've talked to you before about an and yin? Why do we write yi an? 明明是 yin. Why don't we write e and then and then n? Why don't we do that? In fact, 这两个是同一个 phoneme. Well, actually, it's two phonemes. We write them as one. But 这个里面的那个 a 跟这个 a 跟这个 e 其实是同一个音，它只是受到这个的影响，它临时在这个语境有一点变化，可是是同一个东西。In this case, it's pretty clear. an 跟 yen 里面的那个 a 的音应该是同一个 phoneme. In other cases, it's not so clear. Okay? Is anybody not with me? Please ask questions if you want to clarify anything, because I've just related what we're doing in English to what happens in one situation in Chinese. Anybody want to ask anything? 清楚吗? Give me some feedback that shows it's clear. Okay. Look up, smile, say, I got it. All right. So I'm assuming now that you understand everything in this paragraph. There's just one more thing. Towards the beginning of the paragraph, I didn't say that there's something called a ligature. Go to about the 8th or 9th line. If you want to make it clear, if you're using a phonetic style of transcription, and you want to make it clear that this is the same phoneme. 这是一个 phoneme 还是两个 phoneme? 这个 ch 是一个 phoneme 还是两个 phoneme? It's just one. Ch comes together. An affricate, it's an affricate, it's only one phoneme. If we want to make it clear that this actually is only one sound, one phoneme, you can use something called a ligature. Ligature means to bind. 把它连在一起，联系在一起. If you really, really want to make it clear, 你可以画一个这样的符号，让读者知道这其实只是一个 phoneme. Phonetically, 两个音构成一个 phoneme. 可以吗? That's towards the beginning of the paragraph. That's called a ligature. Ligature. L-I-G-A-T-U-R-E, ligature. And we're going to use this ligature in other places, so this is worth knowing. I think we've covered the main points. Let's go on. There's one more minor matter still to be considered in the transcription of consonant contrasts of English. In most forms of both British and American, which does not contrast with which. Especially in standard British English, RP. The hu sound is totally gone. Now, a lot of you think that more conservative pronunciations are perhaps British English. Is that right? 每次看到那个课本有一个发音，可是一般人都不用，你觉得这是美国人简化了怎样？那真正的那个最道地的、最纯正的那个英式应该有这个音。Maybe some of you have this idea. Is that right? Have you had this idea? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Stanley. But in this case, not, because the hu sound, like in which, W-H-I-C-H, is absolutely totally gone from standard British. 就是标准式的 RP 那种音式完全没有 hu， 现在都是 wu， 这我可以确定。And I've discussed this with my British English teacher as well, and I've seen it reported many times. 所以最标准的音式那个 hu 已经不存在，已经不用。If you hear it, 那是刻意，因为一般人 native speakers 不会直接去用这个音。American is different. I push you to get rid of the hu and exchange it for wu because that's the way I speak, and that's the way, in my impression, the mainstream speaks. Most American speakers use the wu sound instead of which. They'll say which for both. However, as I've mentioned in another class, I now have noticed over the past 10 or 15 years, many regions of America still have the hu sound. And many people, many individuals have it. And I have one good linguist friend who is saying, which one is it? She's from Iowa. I said, why do you use hu? She said, I think it's fun. She changed her whole speech style just for fun. She's a linguist. Incredible ear, speaks many languages fluently, Japanese, Chinese, among others. And she now says which one for fun. And it's totally natural. 她就是把它培养回来了. Okay, so in American English, hu is more common, but I encourage you to stick with wu. It's gone from RP. It's the mainstream of American. And there are different ways of writing it. In KK, you represent it with HW. Is that right? And we used to use that in Old English as well. 古英文也用 HW 这个写法. That's probably where we got the inspiration. But later on, with spelling changes, the hu sound came to be written as WH. It got switched around. 发音一样。可是现在的拼法像 what is WHAT。可是呢，那个 Beowulf 的第一个字就是这个字。Beowulf 你们读了没有？读过吗？ What is the first word? What. That means listen. Listen, I'm going to tell you a story. What. And that's how it's written. Besides this way of writing it, we can write it HW, as in KK. We can also write it with an upside down W. This is not an M. 这是个子比较矮的，比较小的。We can use this upside down W for the same sound. 或 That's an IPA symbol, a recognized IPA symbol. And there is a further way of doing it if you really want to. Because this is a voiced or voiceless sound. It's voiced. If we want to make it voiceless, 有个符号，下面一个空的一个圈圈. That means pronounce this as a voiceless sound. So in theory, in actual practice, we have 3 ways of writing 或. And actually, I don't need any of them, right? Because I don't use them. My 3rd grade teacher tried to train us to say which, where, what. And we just thought it was funny. Okay, because none of us spoke like that anymore. But these are 3 different ways of writing the same thing, 或. We've covered 38. All right, so 原来在念的, can you read the first paragraph? We have a new section, the transcription of vowels. We've already talked about consonants. Let's just go look through the table, see if everything is familiar. Those of you who didn't know KK before, let's go through the table on page 36, table 2.1. Page 36, 2.1. Look at the list of symbols on the left. I'll just read them, you repeat. For those of you who don't know the symbols really well yet, this should help you. The rest of you, maybe it will 加深印象. So, everybody, p, pi, t, tai, k, kai, b, bai. Notice my voice gets lower when I voice. Remember that, because in the future when we discuss Chinese tones, we're going to refer to that. 以后我们讨论中文声调系统的时候，加 voicing 声音会变低. This is going to be useful in the future when we discuss Chinese. See how many of you remember it when we refer to it. 它跟声调有关，中文的声调跟 voicing 有关。d, dai, g, gai, mai, nai, rang. Can't put it at the beginning. Fi, v, vi, thigh. Okay, note theta for those of you who didn't know KK. Theta is it's voiceless. V, vi. This is the same sound but voiced, and this letter was also used in Old English and Middle English. 这个字母以前是英文有用过了。S, sai, z, zai. Never mind. Zion, 它一个字再加一个音节，它就构成字。Zion. Next. Sh. And the what they have in parentheses is the other style, the phonological style. S, hachek. Remember hachek. Shy. Zh. Genre. Okay, they don't have it there because they want a single syllable here. L. Lie. W. Why. I don't say why, but it's possible. Everybody, why. And those are the 3 ways to write it if you want to say it that way. But this one again is w. Why. R. Rai. Y. Yi. This is hard for Taiwan students because E and Yi 你们很难区别. Mark that. I may test you on that sometime. 还有另外2对，一个是 E 字母 E 跟 Yi 是你们的意思，另外一对是 East, East 东 东边和酵母. Everybody east. Not ist. It's not ist. It's east. Please don't make the mistake. It's really common. East. Okay, 下一个字一样，可是前面加一个滑音也 yeast. And the other one is ear. Glottal stop. Ear. 年头 year. So put those 3 minimal pairs down. We contrast e and yi. In Chinese, they are not different phonemes. They are allophones. 英国, 英国, it's the same thing. 英国, 英国, 英文, they're the same. But ye are different, yeast are different, and year are totally different. So y definitely is a phoneme. It is not in Chinese at the beginning of an e sound. And then we have h. Actually, it's voiceless. Hi. And all this is aspiration. Remember that for a test. Some tables do not have h because it doesn't have any special place of articulation. 提前讲，那个 h 的发音的位置完全看后面的母音在哪里，那个 h 就搬到哪里去了。So h will be very high in front. Ha, what will it be? Low and back. He and ha, 那个 h 就是跟随着那个母音来定位。And that's why you won't even find an h on some phonetic symbol tables. So once more, hi. And then we have, it says note the following because they're composite. They're 2 phonetic sounds put together to form a single phoneme. Ch, chai. That is now a word that's common in English, right? In Taiwan as well. Chai, Indian chai. You'll hear chai tea. Chai 就是茶，是从中文来的，可是是印度式的茶，是加的那个炼乳的，然后加了一些香料。That's chai. So we can add that word here. It is now a common word. Everybody, ch. No, I'm still on ch. Ch. Chai. And j. Jai. The word they give is jive. Jive. All right. For those of you who didn't know KK before, make sure that you learn these well. Now, what they have here in the different columns, first of all, we already went through the first column with I. Second column, same thing with E. We don't need to repeat it. Just gave us a couple extra example words like Z and V. Well, we had Vi, but Z, we didn't have a word Zai. And then in the third column, some words can only appear at the end or middle of a word. So, like ng. For contrast, we have everybody ram. Ran. Rang. And I know a lot of you will have trouble with this, so we're going to come back to it some other time. And then for, it's there for contrast, listen. Mizzen. All right, mizzen is an unusual word. Look it up yourself. It's unusual. We don't use this word often. Mission. Mission like a mission to Africa, 传教. Vision. Okay, so s, z, sh, zh. Then we have the last column. What is that? It's names for the symbols because when we're talking, we're not writing, we can't see them. We need a way to refer to them. So if it's 小写的什么字母, we just say lowercase p, for example. Everyone, lowercase p. Lowercase p. Lowercase m. Lowercase m. Now for ng, I often just say ng to make it clear. It can be called eng or engma. I've also seen it called engma. So everyone, eng. Engma. So from now on, if I say engma, that means eng 这个音. And then we have theta, because that's from Greek. In modern Greek, I understand it's theta, but we say theta, the classical Greek. Everybody, theta. And then the voiced version, ev. Ev. Now over the phone, it would not be clear. It might sound like S or something. It wouldn't be clear. Or as, I don't know. Then we have, for the elongated sh sound, the elongated S that represents the sh sound, we call it esh. Sometimes we say a long S, just as a lot of 长长的一个 S. Everybody, esh. Or we can say a long Z for zh. That's one way to say it. Everybody, long Z. It's often also called yolk. Yeah. And that's for zhe. That takes care of the names of the symbols. That got us through to vowels. The bell has rung. Okay, it will still be your turn to read. We'll try to get through. We'll try hard to finish the chapter, second hour. We're going to try to go faster. All right, take your break. Before we continue, everybody ready? Before we continue talking about vowels, first of all, did anybody look up mizzen? I found a picture of it online. It's the third mast of a ship. Now, we don't usually sail ships now. We don't have a bunch of masts and sails anymore, so it's not used anymore unless you read old novels. A mizzen, it's the third mast of a ship. All right, talking about phonemes. I think the clearest thing we've said was the day when we said that the phoneme is you and the allophones are the way you behave in different circumstances with different people, right? So the sound as a phoneme, that is just the guannian, just the abstract concept of the sound. But the actual pronunciation in different situations are different allophones, but they all come back to the same sound if they are the same phoneme. This becomes a little problematic when you're working with Chinese because, first of all, as I tried to say in another class, we are very deeply influenced by our writing system. What we believe about our language is we have very, very deep convictions that are based on the writing system. And sometimes they're useful and correct and sometimes not. Some not so correct ones that are misleading in English. The average English speaker believes that NG is two different phonemes. How many is it? Okay, I believe that the average English person or English speaker wouldn't call them phonemes, but he believes those are two separate sounds. Because we talk about dropped N's. If we say, for example, goin' instead of going, we say that's a dropped G, not dropped N, sorry, dropped G. Now, the standard way to say it is going, but in casual speech, we say goin'. We call that a dropped G. Did we really drop a G? Did we take away a sound to make going into goin'? Did we take away a sound? No, we just what? We exchanged sounds. We replaced ing with n, right? N, instead of n, we have n, go in. But native speakers will assume that we have taken off a sound because we have taken off a letter. That's an example of how the writing system confuses us. And you should know that ng was not originally a phoneme in English. 它原先不是一个 phoneme. Those were two separate sounds. So just like in finger, we write ng, but we've got an n and a ger. And actually it's n, not n. So originally, and we would say singer, but then eventually the g got dropped in many situations. So originally we did not have the phoneme ng, and that explains why its distribution is so limited. If it were 从一开始是一个很正常的一个 phoneme 的话，它的分配不会那么有限。Now we only find n where? At the end of a syllable. Okay, now you understand why. Because originally it was not a phoneme at all. Okay? That's one place where we mix up where the writing system affects the way we think about the language and it's not correct. How about th? How many sounds in th? How many phonemes? How many phonemes in th? One. You all know that. You know that better than native speakers because most of you have had KK training. But native speakers will usually think of this as two different sounds, that they're two sounds simply because they're two letters. That's an example of how the writing system really sort of sets and cements the way we think about language. Now, you do the same thing with doing fuhao. And I just had a little discussion with Alex, which I think will throw some light on it. I almost called this a phoneme, but it's not a phoneme, it's two sounds. If you look over here, it's a, n, an, a, n, an. We've got a vowel and a nasal. Those are 绝对的是两个音. But when you look at this, don't you think of it as one sound? Ruby? Yeah, of course you do, because it's just like this in English. All right, we think of th as two sounds because it's written as two. You think of two sounds as one sound because it's written as one sound. That's totally normal. Doesn't mean it's correct, but it's to be expected. But you need to change these ideas now because now you are phoneticians and you know better. So this is an, two sounds, not a phoneme. It's two phonemes. When we put E in front of it, as we mentioned in class before, E is what kind of vowel? Where is it? High front. So it's going to pull the vowel in an up higher too. So it becomes from an, we get yin, from a to e. When we have a velar nasal after it, where do we pronounce a velar nasal? What part of our vocal tract? What part of our vocal tract do we pronounce a velar nasal? Where? Front? Back? High or low? Well, it's coming together, right? So this is very back. And because it's back, we now have an a instead of an a or an e. So we have an, yin, ang, and yang. We've got two things here that could influence the pronunciation of the vowel. We've got y. When we had y in this case, what did it do to the vowel? It raised it, right? Made it higher. So from an we got yin. Now we have ang because the ng sound, the engma sound, pulled it back. But what if we put both of them around that vowel? Which one influences it more? The nasal or the glide? In this case, you can see it's the nasal. We say yang. We don't say yang. We don't say yang, just like we say yin, but we don't say yang. So, both what comes before the vowel and what comes after the vowel can influence the vowel. But in this case, engma is 比较厉害，因为那个 y 你再怎么放个 y 它还是 yang, right? Now, are these all the same phoneme? We have a, we have e, we have a. Are they the same phoneme? You're not so sure because look, you've got, first of all, you didn't even think that this was two sounds, and same for this one, two sounds. And in addition, we've got a totally different symbol here. This is because it's a velar nasal, but the vowel is not represented separately. 没有独立把那个母音写出来，对不对？就把它合并在那个 nasal 里面。Is that right? Give me feedback, guys. Otherwise, I'm going to keep looking at you and asking. Okay. So, we've got different symbols here, but we know that the nasals are different phonemes. 跟 ang, 那个后面那个 those 绝对是不同的 phoneme. 虽然在台式的 Mandarin 里面有一些是开始合并了. But they are different phonemes. But what about the vowel? Are the vowels different phonemes? Use your brain. Think hard. Look at this pattern here that we've got. Very good. Go ahead. You think they're not because? They're just allophones of the same vowel. So here is a really clear example. And by the way, I've started using IPA for Chinese. So write these down. This will give you a help when we start transcribing Mandarin into IPA. Here's an introduction. For n, 我们要用这个有帽子的 a. For 前面有 e 这个有 y 这个 glide， 我们要用到3。后面有 有那个 velar nasal 的时候，我们要用没有帽子的 a. They're all the same phoneme, and that's why I'm using brackets. 我用斜线的话，我可能全部都用 a 一种形式的 a， 因为都是同一个 phoneme. We are quite sure of that. So you're going to have to start looking at Chinese through the lens of the IPA and through the lens of phonetics, and you will see it more clearly. Because what you know now about the sounds of Mandarin is mostly due to what? Mostly based on the 你们对国语的音的了解主要是根据什么？注音符号, which we call in English the Mandarin phonetic symbols. If you want an English name, the Mandarin phonetic symbols. Otherwise known as BPMF. Okay, the Mandarin phonetic symbols. So everybody understands what's going on here? Same vowel, an alveolar nasal gives us a more front vowel. An alveolar nasal plus a glide at the beginning, the y, a palatal glide, makes it higher. So ab goes to e. A velar nasal at the end makes the vowel vary back, and then it becomes a. And then even if we put a palatal glide here, it doesn't change the vowel if there's a velar nasal after it. Everybody follow that? This is really important for you because that's going to help you sort out Chinese much faster if you understand it. 注音符号 is kind of curious. So, I wrote this here. So Alex was saying, are you sure an isn't just one phoneme? Is everybody convinced now that an has two phonemes? 都相信吗? What is 注音符号? 我们怎么样做分类? This is an alphabet, 字母. And an example is A, B, C, D, E. That's an alphabet. And we put sounds together, not quite phonemic, but it's something like phonemes. So n, man, it's 3 letters, 3 phonemes. So sometimes it works pretty well. For Japanese, we have kaki, kuke, ko. That's not an alphabet. We call that a syllabary. Everyone's syllabary. These words are important and they will also turn up in tests. Make sure you understand them and you know the words. That's called a syllabary because we have a consonant plus a vowel. That's a syllable. It's a CV structured syllable. Consonant plus vowel. 大写的 C 是 consonant, 大写的 V 是 vowel. So consonant vowel 这种结构的 syllable, kaki, kuke, ko, etc. That's a syllabary. So these two 类型还蛮清楚. But what is 注音符号? Is it an alphabet? Is it a syllabary? What is it? Yeah, but what about b, e, b? 2 phonemes, 2 symbols. Isn't it behaving like an alphabet? Man, m, a, n, man. Oh, an is not a good, sorry, bad example. Okay. If we take like single vowels, we have no problem. Ma, ma, da, ma, m, a, ma. 2 symbols, 2 phonemes, right? So in those cases, it behaves like an alphabet. But as soon as we get to an, it starts behaving like a syllabary. So what are we going to call 注音符号? A mixture. 综合的。它是两种性质综合在一起。So it is a mixed system. It's part alphabet, part syllabary. All of these words and Wendy, you have a question?
I'm wondering that Korean characters belongs to syllabary?
What would you classify them as? Syllabary or alphabet? Anybody who knows a little bit about Korean. Korean is widely praised as one of the really great writing systems of the world. It's a really good writing system. It was carefully designed to suit the needs of Korean. And there are some allophonic changes. So if you know the letter, you don't always know how to say it unless you know the rules. If you know the rules, you can read anything in Korean. Is Korean an alphabet or a syllabary? For those of you who know a little bit about Korean, if you don't, then you'll have to look it up. What would you say, Wendy? Okay. All right, how about the rest of you? Let's give this to you as a question. Look up Korean, the alphabet, find out about it. I want you to tell me. Maybe I'll give it to you as a test question. I want you to decide. You now understand the difference between an alphabet and a syllabary, is that right? Anybody have any questions? Is it not clear? So, b, e, b, that's an example of 注音符号 behaving like an alphabet. b, an, ban, b, a, n, 3个 phoneme 可是只有2个符号. In this case, it's behaving more like a syllabary. But not completely because, well, yeah, it's close enough, yeah. In that case, it's behaving like a syllabary. Japanese is a clear-cut example of a syllabary. How about Korean? Okay, write it down. I'll ask you on Wednesday. Do you think Korean should be classified as an alphabet or as a syllabary? And I'll write it down so I don't forget. Korean. Okay? Any questions before we move on? We're going to vowels now. Any questions? Okay, anybody? Let's go. All right, so finally you get your chance. Go ahead.
The transcription of vowels. The transcription of the contrasting vowels, the vowel phonemes in English.
Contrasting vowels. Vowels 要重.
Contrasting vowels, the vowel phonemes in English is
In English?
in English
Right.
is more difficult than the transcription of consonants for two reasons. First, accents of English differ more in their use of vowels than in their use of consonants.
Stop right there. Mark this. How do the accents of English vary? In what aspect do they vary the most? Vowels. Remember that. That's not true of different accents of every language. I've talked to you before about Spanish. The double L in Spain is lia, like Elia, Elia, 就是你的她. But in Latin America, it's mostly ella. Elia, ella. So in that case, the two varieties differ more in Spanish. This is Spanish we're talking about. Do they differ more in vowels or consonants based on the data so far? Consonants, the vowels are very, very close. There is not much variation among the different dialects or varieties of Spanish in vowels. But that's an example of how the consonants vary. Another example is the C and Z sounds. In spelling, words that are written with C or Z are pronounced with a th, a theta in Spain, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, cinco in Spain. Cinco, like in English th, but it's cinco in Latin America. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cinco, cinco. So that's another example of where they differ in consonants. But with English, it's the vowels. The vowels vary widely. They're changing too. Vowels are changing in many parts of the English-speaking world. So that's one way, or one reason why what? It's harder to transcribe vowels in English because the dialects vary. We have to pick our dialect before we transcribe. And go.
Second, authorities differ in their views.
Authorities. What's authorities? It's the subject. Stop after the subject. Everybody remember that? 在念的时候，主词整个主词念完了，停一下。然后呢，动词后面停一下会清楚一点。Authorities differ， 因为不是这个原因。in 是什么？介系词 ，right？ 介系词是前庭。So read again.
Authorities differ in their views of.
of 也是介系词哦。
In their views of what constitutes an appropriate description of vowels.
Very good. You said appropriate, which is correct. A lot of people say appropriate, and that's a verb. To appropriate 是占为己有的意思。Appropriate 是适当。All right, we made it through a paragraph. Those are both important because first of all, varieties of English differ greatly in the vowels, and different people have different ideas about how to represent the vowel sounds. Good. Go ahead.
Taking the same approach.
The same approach.
The same approach.
Same 要重一点。
Taking the same approach.
The same approach.
The same approach in looking for contrasting vowels.
Vowels.
In looking for contrasting vowels, as we did for contrasting consonant.
Consonants.
Consonant. We might try to find a minimal set of words that differ only in a vowel.
That what? Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry.
That differ only in a vowel sound.
字
Sounds.
Right.
We could, for example, look for monosyllables that begin with her and end with der, and supplement this minimal set with other list of monosyllables.
Other lists.
With other lists.
Lists.
With other lists
You did it.
of monosyllables that contrast only
Contrast.
that contrast
Good.
only in their vowel sounds.
Good.
Table 2.2.
Take.
Table 2.2 shows five such sets of words. You should listen to the recordings of these words on the CD while reading the following discussion of the vowels.
Okay, recordings.
Recordings.
Yeah, okay, stop there. Let's look at the table. And we're going to use the same method that we use with consonants, but this time we have two separate columns because what? We didn't need two separate columns before because we were talking about consonants and what? What about consonants? Are they so different between British and American English? 差别不大，有，差别不是没有，有， but they're not important enough to bother with. However, when we come to vowels, then we have big problems. We have big differences. So the first column is American. If you look at the R's in there, then you know. The second column is Standard British, sometimes called RP. And like I say, there are not so many native speakers of Standard British anymore. A lot of people speak some kind of dialect that's different from the standard that you find in textbooks. 真正的讲的是很标准的那种 RP 人数现在真的不多，越来越少，因为英式英语在变得很快 as I've said before. So let's just look at the first column for American and we'll go back for British. And we're going to use h and d for the first column. The second column is he. It's an open syllable. So what will we not find in the second column? What will we not find in the second column? Short vowels. Very good. You got it now. And then in the third column, we've added a final D, voiced, and then T, a voiceless final stop. And then we have keyed, kid, etc. We'll worry about the other ones later. So first of all, for American, everybody, E, heed, I, hid, A, haid. That's the way they say head in Singapore, by the way, haid. 这是新加坡说头的发音. All right, head, or it's haid. Yeah, I think it's haid. Had, hard. I do not like using an example with an R after it for any vowel because R changes the vowel in American. In British, hard is a good example for ah, but it's not a good example for American because they always did that in our textbooks when I was in second grade, and I always felt you should not use an example with R because R changes the vowel. If it's R is present through the whole vowel, like bird. 母音一开头就有 R 的成分在，所以其实母音后面放 R 是不是很有代表性？ They do it so they can compare British and American with the same word. But I don't think it's a good example. I would use the word spa or father. Spa, father, or spot. But here we have hard. Let's just change it to spa. Everybody spa. There we go. The next one is hard. Now that's the problem. In American, they're both the same. Hard and hard. They're the same vowel. 很多用 O 拼成的字，所谓的 short O 是 in American. See the same symbol? All right, but they're different in British. We'll come back to it because it's confusing here. The next one, hard. Then we have hood, hold, hood, hud. That's a name, not hood. Open your mouth wider. Hud. Yeah, that's better. And then we have heard. That is not a phoneme in American. We have for British, heard. They put it in the list because it's a phoneme in British. They don't pronounce R's after vowels. In American, how many phonemes is it? 2. Just like an is 2 phonemes. Is 2 phonemes. But they do it because of the British. Next, I. And we would have hide here. Yeah, hide. Ow. Howd. How'd you do? How'd you do in the test? That's a perfectly good word. It's a contraction. How, apostrophe D. How'd. 我们可以用那个. Everybody how'd. Oi. Hoid. That is not a word. Let's use void. Everybody void. And then we have or ear, I'm sorry, here. It is not a phoneme, it's two. Then we have air, also not a phoneme, hair. And ire, also not a phoneme, but we'll go back to British and you'll see why it's there. And then U, hued. U is not a phoneme, we count it as two sounds. It's a special diphthong. It's a rising diphthong. I told you about it before, dig through your notes. Y is an on-glide. It comes at the beginning of the diphthong. 它比较不显著的部分在前面，那个叫 on-glide. 比较不显著的部分像 I 在后面那个叫 off-glide. Remember? 那 on-glide 我们只有 U 没有别的。Alright, 它有个比较特别的一个 status. 它 U 我们通常不，我们就当作是两个音，而不当做一个diphthong. Alright, for British, let's look at the same thing. E is almost the same. My British is not perfect. I'll give you something close. 大概可以懂意思就可以了. Because when people look at the video, they say, oh, what a terrible accent. So I'm just making excuses first. Alright, everybody, E. Heed. I. Hid. Now don't put the schwa in there. American, hid. Hid. In British, no schwa. Hid. A. Haid. These are very similar. Not perfectly the same, but very similar. Head. In American, but in British, it's lower. Had. Had. It's lower, so it'll be 比较低一点. And then, and probably more back. Hard.美式是 hard, 有 r 的，他们念 hard. 然后呢，下一个是，你有没有看到一个新鲜的一个符号？它是没有帽子的 a 倒过来写。That is a new symbol you're going to need. And this is short. This one is short. So you'll see that in the next column, in the fourth column, there's no example. It can occur in open syllables. And this is, in American, it's hod. In British, it's hod. Hod. Don't make it too close, because you'll mix it up with the next one. Hod. Hod. 嘴巴不要太小. All right? The next one is hod in American, and in British, it would be hold. Hold. And my teacher says I do it pretty well now. Hold. All right. And that one is long or short? Long, right. So keep those two separate. Hod is short, hold is long. Open O is long in both dialects. And the 倒过来的 A is short in British. We don't have it in American. But you need that symbol now. The next one, hood. In American, hood. Very clear diphthongal character. British, no diphthong. Hood. Yeah. Next one is, let's see, we're on, all right. Hold in American. In British, it's more of an O sound. And I overdo it usually. Hold. Hold. Yeah, so you see a schwa and an U. So O in American is usually schwa plus U in British. Hold, hold, hold. Okay? The next one is U, similar. U. Hood. All right? The next one is quite different in British. In American, it's cup, hud. In British, it sounds more like hud. It's not like father. It's not it's hud. Hud. Okay? That's why a lot of people get it wrong in English now. They're using a British-influenced 倒过来的 V. 到 V 很多人到现在台式英语里面用的是受英式影响的一个 sound. A cup. It should be cup in American, but it's cup in British, a cup of tea. All right? Next one, we don't have an American except with In American, it's heard. In British, it's heard. Heard. Good. The next one is this almost the same. Hide. 稍微有一点不同。再来一次 hide. Okay, the next one, ow, is very similar. And we don't have an example, but howd. Howd. Yeah, we do. We have howd. Similar. Oi is very similar. I think my British friend says the all part longer than I do. I say, for example, void, and he might say void. He might make it longer, okay? So it's very short in American, void, void, okay? Then we have ear. In American, it's ear. Everyone, ear? Here. British, here. Here. Now, is that 1 or 2 syllables? Here. They count it as 1 syllable because a diphthong means it occurs in the same syllable. But if you say it slow, it sounds like 2 syllables. Here. Come here. Here. To me, my ears say 2 syllables. And besides, I believe there's an R there. That's all the more reason I want to hear another sound. And I will tell you something that's funny with Americans. When we're listening to British, we often hear R's when they're not there. 我们因为习惯 R 会被一个schwa 来代替，我们就当作好像真的有听到 R 一样。That's happened before. And I'll say, well, I heard an R and his British. And my friend says, no way. No, impossible. But I hear R's. Well, I'm not so much now, but for a while I did. 我以为我听过 R. Because I automatically, my brain puts R's in there. And you may do the same too because you're used to American English, most of you. The next one is hair in American. In British, hair. Hair. Okay? And then we have hired. This one's problematic because it can be a sanmu'in. It can be hired, hire, hire. Can you hear 3 vowels? In British, it can be 3 vowels. Hire. Try hire. Hire. But you can also say hire. He wants to hire someone. Hire, hire, hire. 它可以省略变成一个 diphthong. Everybody? Hire. Hire. Okay, and you is about the same. Hewed. Hewed. I think they have more friction. British consonants in my experience tend to be more affricated. They have more friction. 就是英式的子音，它那个摩擦的程度比美式大。Okay? They're not always affricated, but I often hear more friction, more force in the consonants than I do in American. And the other columns, you can look at yourself. Let's just go over what they are for, what they're there for. In the next paragraph, he says that, first of all, we're looking at only one form of British and one form of American. So not all Americans speak like this, and not all Brits speak like that. It's just 2 representative kinds of English, one American, one British. And we don't pronounce R's after vowels in English because, in British English, because British English is not a what kind of dialect? Rhotic, yeah. Let's stick with the O sound. Rhotic. British English is a non-rhotic variety. Not all British English. In many parts of England, they do have R's, but not in standard British. So British English is a non-rhotic dialect. My dialect is a rhotic. I speak a rhotic dialect of English. And because of the dropped R's, they did used to have R's. That's why they're in the spelling. And early on in English, R's used to be trilled. 最早的时候，古英文的 R 是 R 是后来的一个发音变化。All right? And then the dropping of the R's is fairly recent in British English. 只是几百年而已的事情。那个母音后的 R 不发音，那是最近几百年的事情，本来有。And because of the dropped R's, we have a bunch of extra diphthongs. Pick out very quickly the diphthongs we have because of dropped R's in British English. Go through the list, quickly grab them. In column 2, they are? Which ones? Ear as in here, and air as in hair, and ah as in ha. All right, those are 3 extra diphthongs we have because of dropped vowels in British English. And we also have the extra sound as in heard. Heard. And that's not a diphthong, but it's a sound we don't have in American. Everybody found it? All right. And, okay. So we have extra diphthongs in British. And they're talking about some variations in American English, such as odd, caught. Stanley's been posting some questions about this on NTU Phonetics on Facebook, so you can go back to those posts. And also on our website, I want you to read some web pages. 现在是额外加的哦。Go to pages 25 and 26. Please read pages 25 and 26. Those are the two pages that discuss the merger in American English. And as I've mentioned before, about what percent of Americans merge these two sounds? And for example, taught, caught, caught. 美国的大概%多少把这两个音合并了？ Easy to remember, just guess. It's about half. 大约是50%的人 跟 已经合并了。You'll need to know this. Okay? 大概有一半的美国人跟 是一个音，都念作也可以，都念作也可以。可是合并了是同一个音，不区别。About half of Americans. And some speakers, mainly from the East, distinguish between can from the noun can. So I can do it 是一种发音，可是罐头是 can， 它比较像 diphthong. I'm at the first paragraph on page 40. Everybody got that? So can 当做一个情态动词、情态助动词 is just can. 可是罐头有些人会念 can， 它好像一个 diphthong 一样。I've heard that. So the first column in table 2.2 is American. The second column is standard British. And then he tried to line them up as best as he could. And then, let's see. How did we pick the vowel symbols for the IPA? We used continental European values. If we just pick a language from West Europe, like French, Spanish, or Italian, 它的 spelling 就是用到那个母音的那个写法跟发音，我们就是用那个东西做 IPA 的符号。So for example, if you see an A in Italian or in Spanish, it will usually be a. In American, it's usually a. But in these languages, it's usually a. So that's why we picked the symbols we did for the vowel symbols in IPA. Okay? 就是根据西欧就多数的语言的用法，它的拼法跟发音的用法。And it's also pretty much applicable to languages like Swahili, Turkish, and Navajo as well. So we will use the same symbols of the IPA when we're writing a spelling alphabet, when we're creating a spelling alphabet for new languages, like the three I just mentioned. Turkish used to be written in what kind of an alphabet? Alexander's not in class this year. Alexander's crazy about Turkish, right? 张世全. Okay? So Turkish is now written in the Latin alphabet with some extra symbols, some diacritics. It used to be written in what? Turkish used to be written in what kind of alphabet? Just guess. Think of their religion. Arabic. Arabic, not aerobic, by the way. Okay, everybody, Arabic. It's written in the Arabic alphabet. Like many languages that have a largely Muslim population, many of them adopted an Arabic alphabet, but they changed with the Turkish Revolution. 就是那个土耳其建国的时候, they changed to Romanization. And there's another place in China that uses the Arabic alphabet. Where? Xinjiang. They also used Romanization for a while. For a while they used the Latin alphabet, and then they changed back to the Arabic alphabet. So if you go to Xinjiang, you will see signs all over in the Arabic alphabet for Uyghur, which is related to Turkish, by the way. Okay, and we did not realize our dream. All right, so we're going to start with the second to last paragraph of 40. Please read ahead. Read ahead. Read the web pages I just gave you. Read ahead in the text so that we can get through it fast. They're mostly things that we already know. We just need to sort of solidify them, 把它定下来, and then get ready for the next test, which will be in another week or two. Okay? So please preview the text. Let's get through it next time, and then we'll see you on Wednesday.